How do you knock the socks off of first-time campers on that first day?
This is CampHacker. Come find our show notes and our blog for camp directors and leaders at camphacker.tv.
Running camp comes with enough moving parts. UltraCamp keeps registration, payments, and communication in one place so you can spend less time juggling systems and more time building an incredible camp experience. Learn more at ultracampmanagement.com/camphacker.
If you're still making camp schedules and spreadsheets, you know how draining it is and how often mistakes slip in. Enter Camptivities. It's made by camp people for camp people to save time, cut errors, and make camp run smoother. Be the change your camp needs. Explore smarter scheduling today at camptivities.com.
Hello, Camp Mavericks, and welcome to the Camp Hacker podcast, brought to you by UltraCamp, Camptivities, and the Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic. My name is Chris Hudson. I work with camps to help them run better, lead better, and create programs which don't fall apart on the first day.
And I'm Travis Allison. I'm a summer camp consultant specializing in helping camps reclaim their staff time, build resilience, and reignite the purpose in their work.
And I'm Kim Aycock, and I develop emerging leaders with the skills that robots can't do. And I work with you, camp directors, who work with those same emerging leaders.
And I'm Michael Brandwein, your friend Michael from Chicago, and I'm a robot. So I'm very disappointed to hear Kim say that. I'm a robot. My intelligence is entirely artificial. People have been saying my intelligence wasn't real since I was in elementary school. And what do? I train staff at camps, and I train leadership teams at staff and serve as a consultant as well, and write books to help support our getting the greatest power out of camp that we possibly can.
Thank you, Michael and Kim, for joining us for this topic. If you've been listening this fall, Kim and Chris and I talked about welcoming brand new staff on the first day, and we didn't get time to talk about this welcoming campers, although we thought we would, but then we decided this needs its own particular discussion. So this is based on the idea that, or maybe it's a Michael Brandwein question. The question is, do campers who are at camp for the very first time need or benefit from a different approach on that very first day? And I will say this comes out of camps for whom the first day welcome is loud and singing and chanting and a lot of that stuff. And I wonder if that's pretty intimidating if you're new to a situation or that's sort of not your natural state. And that's just kind of where I asked the question about this. So I wanted to first spend some time before we dig into that day, talk about before camp and then staff training and then the day, and we'll go from there. I wonder for you, Kim, what are the sort of things you think people need to do to prepare a new camper coming to camp before even staff training?
So I have worked with some camps who have done just amazing, like they've created these camper liaison programs where they've actually hired a staff member, or that's part of one of their leadership team, year-round team person's job is to actually really hone in and really look at that new camper experience. And they meet each new camper, they meet the families of each new camper, they really get to know the new camper, what makes them tick, what are some things that drive them crazy, all those kinds of things. And they're just a really critical piece in that transition from home to camp. And so I can bring in more of that story when we get to the camp part, but just having that one sort of person who's dedicated and really looking at the new camper experience, I think I've seen it just do wonders for that whole transition.
Absolutely. And I think I've been hearing camp champions in Texas talking about having a special new family liaison for a number of years. And for them, they started this because they realized that if kids would come for 2 summers, then they would come as long as they could. But it was a matter of getting them to come for a second summer. And one thing was this prep that Kim was talking about, talking to families and the kids and getting them set up. Michael, is there stuff that you think it's important that we get going with campers before that set us up for success?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'll go backwards. You know how they say that when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I'm a staff trainer, and when you
Mhm.
raise that question, if is it all right if I jump into staff training to go backwards?
Absolutely.
One of the great, I think, a terrific, valuable, efficient thing to do with staff to say to them, grab a pen. Grab a piece of paper. First, explain to them what a pen is, and hold up the paper to demonstrate, and then and say to them, here, take 90 seconds, should be very short, and write down a list of questions that you think that campers have the first time they walk into camp. And then on the other side of the sheet, their parents as well. But everything you write down has to have a question mark. Don't worry about answering it. It's got to be a question. And then about 90 seconds into it, I stop them and then I say, let's also specifically consider first time folks, first time campers. What are some particular things that you think they would be most likely to ask? And if you already listed it, put like FT for first time or put a star by those to be ones that we would focus on for them. And then after that, you have them share that list for 90 seconds with a partner. If this is how you practice empathy. This is how you put yourself into that role. And then I can talk later about this, but then where you go with that is to say the first impressions we make with people, answer those questions. You know, for decades, I said first impressions last. And in fact, in one of my books, I said first is last. So a first impression is a lasting impression. Just to be, quirky, creative about it, first is last. But I've learned to add to it, and it answers key questions that they have. The way you greet someone answers key questions. So the reason I messed up your order, I'm sorry for being non-linear there for a moment, is to say that yes, when it comes to preparing them to come, take that list that's made by your leadership team, because staff haven't had a time to do that, and look at those questions and then say, how do we answer those questions? These things that people are wondering about. One final point, I always give an example. My favorite example to give is, and I love making it a blank, so verbally. So when you say this to staff, say, one of the questions, for example, there's no wrong answer here, but one of the questions would be, will I make, and then just pause, and then somebody will raise their hand and say friends, and then you put your fist in the air and say excellent. That's exactly the kind of question probably everybody asks. You as staff probably ask that, right? Okay, so give them an example of kind of what we're thinking of, and then use that list to track back to what Kim was talking about, which is how do you, as a liaison or just as a camp generally, help them answer these important questions that they have even before they set foot on the property.
Hard agree with everything that's been said. I also have staff training stuff, but I don't want to, because if Michael talks about staff training, I talk about staff training, then we're talking about staff training. So I'm just following up on what Kim said. And yes, before everyone gets upset, this does take a significant amount of time, but I think it's worth it. Every new camper and every new family, schedule a Zoom call with them, one with the parents alone, and then one with the parents and the child. Because I think there's a couple of things you can prepare them for. Being able to ask you questions about the experience is super helpful. It calms the parents down, it calms the child down. Sometimes if we can get a counselor on the call, any counselor will do that just so they see another face that they can recognize. And the thing that I'm always worried about with camp is that, yes, when the kids get there, they're screaming, they're jumping up and down. It's neuroatypical kids. That could be really upsetting and triggering the first day, the first moment. And that's not what we want to happen. So preparing them and the parents for that is great. Everyone's going to be really excited when they come to camp, and there's going to be big crowds. There's going to be a lot of noise. Let's talk about how do you handle that in school? How do you handle that at soccer practice? Like, let's talk about the tools that you use and how can we bring them to the space? And that's a serious conversation. It's an hour long, like Zoom. We take it really seriously, but it's so worthwhile because by the time the kid shows up, they know what I look like. They know what at least one other adult looks like. And they can walk over to that adult and say, hey, I know you. And then that counselor, of course, introduces them to a bunch of kids, like boom to the boom. So I know it will take up a lot of time. It doesn't have to be just one person, but if you can assign to different members of staff, be like the welcome person. And we tell them, if you want to talk to us again, if you want to schedule another call, please let us know. And people take us up on that. Sometimes kids take us up on that. We open the Zoom and it's just the kid.
Yeah.
And they have one question: do you serve tacos? And we're like, yes. And they're like, thank you. And they hang up. But if that's what they need to feel comfortable, bring it on.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be great if that was one of the questions that you and your leadership team produced. Favorite foods? Do you have my favorite foods?
Perfect.
And then that gives you the content to go back to what Kim was saying. So, I mean, what do you talk about? Sometimes they will know what their questions are, but sometimes it's really useful to know that, be able to preface it by saying, a lot of people wonder, and that makes them feel more comfortable, because I'm embarrassed to say, how do you know where to go to the bathroom? I'm not going to tell you that. But
Right.
that's one of the things that kids want to know about when they arrive. Where's
Mm-hmm.
the bathroom? And I'm not going to be the kid who asks that. There's no way. But if you know things that I might likely be worried or thinking about or looking forward to, then that guides people in doing it. Yeah.
I've even seen some really, really awesome camps who put some things on their website to help kids ahead of camp. Like, this is our song, this is our camp song, and we sing this every single day. And it's on the front page when you log on, and you can see, and it's got, the video of them singing the song. So the kids can actually practice the song and get to know the words before they come. Or there's a camp, I actually heard this on the Day Camp podcast a couple weeks ago or months ago, where Robin Hood is in Canada, right? They do a camp dance, and they have the video of the camp dance, so the camper can learn the moves before they get there. So like, how great to feel like, okay, I'm coming into this really, I'm nervous to come into this space I don't really know much about, but I do know the song, I know the words, or I know this dance. I just think things like that can be so subtle but so powerful.
And I think the key to it, and certainly the key to Robin Hood's success with the dance, is not to just say we do a dance or we do the song, but to have somebody break it down and actively teach it through video, or get new campers on a call. So I think kids should arrive knowing a place, of face, and one thing they can join in on the first day. So if it's a song or a chant that just based on my own experience, I've told the story lots of times, that I just, knowing Johnny Appleseed when I came there, was like, oh, good, here's a thing I can do on the first day, because my mom had taught me that before I went.
You can
a couple of other things that go ahead, Michael. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, you can ask people if they would consider taking first-time campers after they've arrived and asking them a couple questions that you can video and making it part of your welcome bank. That's what I would do. When I arrived, I was worried about this, or I wondered this, and I found out this. So, so welcome. Because a lot of camps have, I love Camp Happy Hemorrhoids because, you get to blah, 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 blah. That's wonderful. But this is a very specific, targeted example of how you can collect that information from actual customers, first timers, and then use that to be able to create resources for parents to watch with their kids. As dad, I would say, have you ever wondered that, Benjamin? Or Benjamin, how would you answer that? Or what did you think of that? All four of us know how hard it is sometimes for parents to have discussions with their kids about this sort of stuff. So this is a nice way to guide those discussions and help parents figure it out.
And it's something I try to get my kids to do with parents. So it's just reframing the question for kids. Like, what do you wish you knew on the first day that you know now? So we know that that's something we have to address. With parents, we just figure, put it in systems. With kids, I'd like this idea of building a library of things I wish I knew on the first day. And now I'm going to be the one that teaches you instead of an adult camp director, whichever, doing it. One other thing I've seen, what actually was part of Camper Surefoot Girls in Wisconsin, has a first day coloring book. And I helped Gabe with it. And we found an artist, and we walked through just the different steps of the whole day, waking up at home to camp. And Birchville hired an artist to do a coloring book of that whole day. So kids get mailed that a few weeks before camp so that they can work on it on that day, or have done it, but they can see kind of in nice, simple language and illustrations, actual places at camp again, faces and spaces, and just sort of what a whole day looks like up until the time they go to bed at camp that night.
That's brilliant. And what a great conversation starter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Any staff prep before staff training regarding this topic? Yes, Chris Hudson.
Oh, yes, so much. Mirror the experience of the campers with the staff. The staff is also nervous about being there. Okay. And if you have the opportunity, talk to them about that. And just like I said before, tell them about like, listen, when you get to camp, all the other staff members, they are already best friends. And I understand that's intimidating. Like, how do you normally react to situations like that? Preparing them through the use of that discussion. And then everything else applies. Usually when we hire people on the second interview, because we do 2 interviews, we have a counselor on the call as well. It's the same sort of principle. So when they get there for staff training and everyone's jumping up and down, at some point we do split returners and first-time staff. And part of that conversation is, how is that for you? Right? Remember this feeling, because it's going to be happening again. Everything that you needed from us today to make you feel comfortable, you're going to have to present for these kids. So let's have a conversation about what things made you comfortable. It's an active conversation, and it's super helpful because the first timers get it. The returners already got this when they were first timers, so everyone is on board with that. That's my trick. I think it works well.
I like that Camp Waro does for staff and for campers. They bring in returners ahead of new campers, and that is even acknowledging they acknowledge.
Travis, excuse me, you mean ahead of new staff?
Yeah, so new staff will come in. No, returning staff will return in before new staff.
Yeah, new staff. Yeah, okay.
And same, and new returning campers will come in before new campers.
Yes.
And Waro acknowledges that there is a point at which they have to manage coming into a new situation and sort of have everybody looking at you because you have this group of people who have sort of settled, but they have really. Waro was very intentional about everything, and so they've worked through that process. But for them, it allows the returners to get a lot of the screaming, hugging, happy, dancy stuff out of the way, and then actually honor that time, give them a chance to do it, and then they ask them to change modes and become the welcoming team and be really thoughtful, and then talk through what that can feel like as a new camper coming in. But I mean, I love the intention behind it. I also love the act of deputizing campers for any job, and getting them involved in that welcoming thing is really, really great.
Can I just also suggest the reverse of that works just as well? If the first timers come first, then the returners dribble in, then they're not confronted with 40 people all hugging.
Sure.
Anyway, I'm just saying, splitting up is a great idea.
Okay.
Well, and I think it's also an opportunity for like your second year staff or campers to be the really like part of that welcoming, because they were the closest to being new last summer or whenever they were new, right? And so like if I think you said champions, they said that was, they were losing kids, or you can get them past the second summer, then you've got them. So what if they have a really important role that second summer is to really be like, and be even assigned a buddy to somebody who is coming in new, and because they can remember what it was like for them being new. And like Michael said, that video that they said, they can do that kind of thing. So I think really thinking intentionally about our second year people, and then just keep building it out to the greater camp community, so that we're all being welcoming and being really paying attention to what it's like to remember. Because I think it's also just, we're all new at different situations. And so just remembering, like, when was the last time you were new at something? That's just a great question to even ask in an interview, right? Like, when was the last time you were new or you tried something new? So it happens more than you think.
Any pieces of staff training period that you think would help address this or be specific or intentional about this. Better word, intentional.
Well,
this feels like a Michael thing.
I'll footnote myself. From my Training Terrific Staff book, I explain what some of you will be familiar with, which is PDP. And PDP stands for Pass Down Principle. And the Pass Down Principle is something to put on a card and stick every place you do any preparation for training. The Pass Down Principle says the way we do everything with staff during training becomes a model of how they will turn around and do it with their kids.
Yes.
Yep.
And so a corollary of that is that the way we greet staff, returning and first-time staff, becomes a model for them of how we want them to greet those same groups of campers, returning and new, on the first day of a camp session. Then we jump back and say, what's the power of modeling? You can stand in front of staff and say, now, when the kids arrive, we want you to do these 4 things. But if they've actually experienced those same 4 things when they arrived for training, score. Now it's far more likely. And then you go back and you say, what happened when you were greeted? And how did you feel about that? And why is that important to do with our campers? That's much better teaching than going to the flip chart and saying, here's how we do it at our camp. Let them actually experience that. One great opportunity here, of course, to follow up on what Kim said and Chris, is that you can assign tasks and roles to people who are returning and to leadership team members as well, so that they're responsible for how those folks are greeted and staff are greeted. This is not, just for the members of the leadership team. You can ask people who at a day camp to come a little bit early. You can give them a special t-shirt that makes them part of the greeting team. And they have a very important function, and that helps them own it. So I think that's really important. We don't have to go into detail in this. I mean, I teach staffs 5 specific things for what I call a perfect greeting. And those 5 things, which I call WESTI, W-E-S-T-I, are the things that we want to use when greeting staff, so that they actually see it being done.
Give us the acronym, Michael.
Oh,
Somebody's
okay.
Gonna be like, Michael, please
yeah,
tell us
WESTI, W-E-S-T-I. That's in Training Terrific Staff Volume 2. Sorry for incessant footnoting, but people ask me, well, where, so there it is. And I mean, I can tell you what it is, but I don't want to cheapen it. There's details of each of those things, but the W is warm smile, the detail to which is talking about what in theater is called silent script. So when you say something inside your head, that affects what your body and particularly your face looks like. That's why when we do a close-up on Chris Hudson's face in a movie, and Chris has no lines of dialogue, but we can tell what Chris is thinking at this moment, and Chris doesn't quite buy what Kim said, but wants Kim to believe that. Chris is actually reciting lines in his head, and we never get to hear it, but that's why Chris's face looks so perfect, because our body will follow what our brain is thinking. So I have them develop, this only takes 30 seconds, but a silent script, so that when they walk up to anybody, they're saying something to themselves. I mean, I like saying how lucky I am. I don't say this out loud, but how lucky I am that I have a job this summer where I can actually change another person in 5 days for the rest of their life. Holy cow. And then I say, Kim, it's nice to meet you. And it is. And my face and the excitement that's expressed by my body is genuine, because I've got something that I'm thinking about. The E is eyes, the importance of eye contact. And I have quick games they can play in order to get them to do that, because for some folks that's more challenging, and not everyone uses eye contact. So what do you do in order with your body to show people you're paying attention to them exclusively? S is shake a hand or stoop if you need to. T is not only tell them who you are, but to tell how you feel. So an example of that I give them, and then I have them take 30 seconds and write 2 or 3 more. But an example would be, I've been waiting for you. Not in the sense of, where you've been, you're late, but I've been waiting for you. There's somebody here at camp who really has been excited and can't wait to see you, because I've been thinking about you for a couple of weeks because you're on my list. Another favorite one I have is to look at my camper list, even if I don't need to, and to say, what is your name? Kim Aycock? And then stop and put your best face on and go, I need a Kim Aycock. And then Kim's face goes like this for, it's embarrassment, whatever. And it's disgrace. I need one. And sometimes I would shout, especially with the younger ones. As a young counselor, I would shout and I would say to Assistant Director Chris, I've got the Kim Aycock, and the kids would go like that. They didn't know, well, clearly I have a crazy counselor, but I really wanted to convince them that. And the I'm proudest of because it's introduced them to somebody else. So it's when I meet Kim, I say, and this is Chris's first year too. Chris, please say hi to Kim. That's a professional touch that very few people remember to include, but we drill that. Westy got a little handout, of course, on Michael. I have a handout where they can kind of fill that in and practice it with a partner. I have them practice it with a partner, but they've got that down, and it makes it easier to do because that's how they were welcomed as staff when they walked into the parking lot.
Right.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Exclusive for CampHacker listeners, grab UltraCamp's free guide, The Parent Experience Checklist. Practical steps to simplify registration and keep families coming back. Download at ultracampmanagement.com/CampHacker. Parents don't want clunky processes, and you don't want constant phone calls. UltraCamp helps you simplify registration with mobile-friendly forms, offer payment plans that work for your families, reduce calls and emails with automated reminders, and keep parents engaged with built-in communication tools. UltraCamp helps you create smooth, stress-free parent interactions so your team can focus on camp, not customer service. Learn more at ultracampmanagement.com/CampHacker.
If you're still building camp schedules and spreadsheets, you know how much time it eats up and how easily mistakes sneak in. Camptivities changes that with scheduling software that saves hours and ensures every camper gets the experience you promised. Whether it's group or camper scheduling, different schedules every day, or you just want to break your own rules to give a deserving camper a popular activity, Camptivities handles it all. With auto scheduling and over 70 easy-to-use reports, you'll reduce errors, keep staff happy, and run a smoother program. Be the change your camp needs. Start today at camptivities.com. Now's the time to find a better way to schedule this summer. Don't wait. Next summer will be here before you know it. We'd love to show you the next big thing in camp. Visit camptivities.com to set up a time to chat. Let us help you get away from your desk and back out to camp.
Chris, what else do you think is important to cover in training that makes for a good first day for a brand new camper?
I brought up neurotypical and neuroatypical earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I'm really trying to focus on when we think about diversity, because we think a lot about race, we think a lot about gender and sexuality, but all these kids are on a spectrum as far as like what kind of capacity they have, where their executive function is. And especially on that first day, there's a lot of tasks that need to get done. As far as like, what am I trying to get at? I'm going to start in the back. I think it's really helpful for first-time campers, and we've been saying this the whole time, to get assigned someone, if possible, to sort of guide them through it, guide them through the registration, whether the parents are there or not, guide them through the registration, show them where they get the lice check, where to put their bag. There's a lot of like administrative, let's call them, things that are happening that day. And I think it would behoove everyone to put that into their training, just like a recognition of like, it doesn't have to be big and deep, like, how to detect if their kids are neurotypical. It doesn't have to be that deep.
Yeah. Because
also I think when kids are really on the spectrum far to one side, we focus on those sorts of things. But I've met a lot of kids who their executive function is poor. And if they, socially they're great, but like on day 3, their bag, it's all over the cabin, and they're like really crying about it. They're upset about it. They don't know how it got that way. Anyway, my point is this: on that first day, there's a lot going on. And I just think just mention that in staff training. I think it's worth a mention for people to understand that everyone's working with different stuff. Yeah.
And please do mention it in staff training.
Yeah.
And please also mention it on the first day kids are coming. Because so much happens in staff training. I think reinforcing with staff just the important mindset things, the empathetic things, it's worth saying again on the morning before those kids arrive.
And also, like, again, like I said earlier, mirror the experience with staff. At staff training, there's a lot of administrating things that happen, like, oh, we've got to get your I-9 together, like all of that. Like maybe also preempting that with a conversation with them. about like the process and how we're aware of that, how we're thinking about that. It sets the tone for not just the counselors with like say ADD or ADHD, but everybody understand this is something we also pay attention to.
Great.
I think there's also some like thinking even, I'm going to back us up a little bit, even now, like thinking about like what your opening day looks like for staff and for campers. And if you've ever had some, like I had the pleasure of being, coming from a camp that I'd been at for years and years. And then all of a sudden I plop into a new camp. Right. And I'm like looking at opening day for the first time, just wow, this is a lot. And I was watching certain things unfold. One being like the drop off time says this at all the parent materials, but why are there people lining up at 7:30 a.m. outside the gate waiting to get in? It's because those are the returning campers and those are the kids who are trying to get the bed they want in the cabin first. And the new campers are going to be following the rules. And if it says to show up at 10 o'clock, they're going to show up at 10 o'clock. And guess what? They're going to get into the cabin and all of the beds have been taken. And they're, I guess this is my bed. I get the bottom left corner which is the darkest of the whole, whatever. And so it blew me away. Like I was just watching this unfold, but if you never take the time to think about like what it might feel like for somebody who's totally brand new, it can be really, so just even, and so by making the small change of like, we just assign beds, like we have a space for you. This is your space. This is where you're going to sleep. This is where you're going to put your stuff. Like it's all labeled. So there's no like trying to figure that out. And it's still chaotic, yes, but it's also like, okay, they've been planning for me to come. They know like they have this space carved out for me. So then there was no need for anybody to be at the gate at 7:30 in the morning. They just came when they were supposed to. Did it take a little while to sort of make that change? Absolutely. When you start thinking like, why are we doing this? And what is the fallout,
I love that. And I never thought about that before. But I do, yeah, I guess there are better beds.
Anything that says welcome or you belong or this is your place, you have a place is powerful.
I've even seen camps who like, I've been thinking a lot because I just came off of the day camp convention last week. And, somebody mentioned the camp t-shirt, Michael, I think you mentioned that, and that's where everyone has the same t-shirt. It's like an instant, like I belong here because I'm wearing the t-shirt that everybody else has. And so when on the first day when staff arrive and they see everybody wearing last year's t-shirt, well, they don't have last year's t-shirt. So you want to give them this year's t-shirt as fast as you can, so that everybody's wearing this year. And so I know a camp who sends everybody, campers, their this year t-shirt. So when they come riding through the gates of camp, they're all in this year's t-shirt. And it's just a different, it just has a different vibe and a different feel. And then, at day camp, when you have the different groups and it's like wearable identity. Like it's very visible and it's super easy to do, but I had never really thought about that part before. So anyway.
I'll add a little day camp hint that certainly applies to overnight resident sleepaway camps as well. But when all the staff are wearing the same t-shirt, it makes it hard for younger children to figure out who their counselors are. In other words, to make them distinctive. So it's a really nice touch to ask counselors to add something to that, a costume piece. I don't mean, like a big dinosaur head, but, a hat with a propeller on it or a bow tie or something like that. That's my counselor Travis, because he's the guy who had that pin on that he was wearing of a magician waving a wand or whatever it is, but just something to make them not look exactly the same. That was a clever thing that a boss, when I was a counselor, explained to me years and years ago. And I thought that was a great example of looking at things through the eyes of our first-time customers. If you open a restaurant, You know, you open an amusement park, you open a shoe store, anything like that. What is that customer experience like when a person has never walked into your store before? I had this 2 days ago where I walked in and wasn't sure, you know, I had to return something, but I hadn't bought it at that store and the layout was a little different. No one really had stood in the front of the store and said, now, if I'm looking for this, it was a signage problem. The signage
Yeah.
was not in the right place because no one had really stood there and thought about, I assume, what would, you know, again, I go back to my favorite thing, questions. What questions are people likely to have when they're a new customer and don't know where you go for things? And they're anxious and they're in a hurry and they want to get their to-do list checked off. So it's the same as camp.
Yep. This also makes me want to say that having an outside view of your opening day, drop off day, having an outsider there who you trust and who will be really honest with you, like Kim's experience of saying, why are there people lined up at the door at 7 when we said 10? Having somebody out there who you've empowered to say, please ask me the hard questions, but just walk around and see is incredibly powerful, to have someone who's not blind to just the little things because they're so used to it, or there's so much going on they can't think of all the little things. I think that's really powerful as well. Chris, is there anything else for drop off day that the suggestions you have?
I was just running through like what drop off looks like at Camp Highlight because like what Kim said is really like, I mean, you rocked my whole world. I was like, that is why they show up. Of course, it's why they show up so early. I just thought it's because they couldn't get enough of us. I mean, it's probably that. I know it's that, but also it is definitely the bed thing. So I'm just running through trying to think about where else can we improve. I like what everyone had to say here today because I know my experience has been that by the time we get to the first meal's dinner, like those first time campers have really like folded into it. That says a lot about the programming, but also just about the preparation as well, right? How well prepared the staff and the other campers were for this kind of thing. We do mention this. We do mention it to the returning campers whenever we can. Like we pull them aside and be like, listen, they know who's new, first of all, because the return rate's so high. There's only so few new campers, which is also a problem in and of itself, right? When you're the only new kid in the cabin and everyone else was in that cabin with these counselors last year, like, and the returners also are very welcoming because we trained them to be that way from when they're little. And everyone at Camp Highlight gets greeted with "Welcome home."
Oh, how nice!
Yeah, welcome home. We say that to each other back and forth. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well,
Michael, when we were talking about this topic before we started
Kim had
recording,
something.
no, I was just thinking about going back to what I said earlier about the camper liaison, and we were talking before we even started recording about like, can you have can you get groups of kids together intentionally where you have the first year kids together and and the answer is yes, and that's where some of these camps are doing, and they're having like a welcome for the first year campers by this group of people, and then they're having a separate sort of welcome by the returning kids or staff or whatever by another group of people, and then they're intentionally talking about the other group and then how we can bring those two groups together. So how the returning kids can feel welcoming and invite the other folks in, and then how the new kids can find their place in the sea of returning staff, or kids or campers, or staff. So I just think, yes, we can do these things, and we just have to, this is the great time to do it, right? December, or whenever you happen to be listening to this.
Yeah.
Keep going. I didn't mean to, I kind of got us. So Michael, I think you wanted to say something.
Travis was posing a question.
Well, it was just when we were prepping for this call and talking about how we were going to talk about it, Michael, it seemed to me like you were thinking that the way we do this for new people should be just the way we do it for all kids. Is that reading too much into what you were asking?
No, well, no. Most of what we do to develop those opening relationships should be the same for people who return as folks who were new, And folks who are new have to return to my theme of questions, have some additional questions, because a returning camper knows where you go to eat. At day camp, they know where you get on the bus to get home. Day campers, young ones particularly, they spend all day the first day, maybe the second day, wondering, how am I going to get home? I mean, I know it's a bus,
Right.
or I know I go to some place and mom or dad or, aunt so-and-so is going to pick me up, but I don't remember where that is anymore. That was way on the other side of camp. I haven't seen that since they dropped me off. These are all things that they think of in their stomach, not in their brain. And so they just have some additional questions and things like that. So I don't want to take anything away from the fact that first timers have additional needs, but most of what we teach staff about how to create first impressions are things that we want them to do at the beginning of every session with every camper. And can I give you one of my favorite examples of that?
Please.
Games. So for example, I don't often get to see camps on the first day of a session, but sometimes the nature of my work allows me to do that, because I'm doing something midsummer, for example, and they have a changeover and kids are coming, and I'll see them play a game where, what's the name? Well, it has different names, but they stand in a circle and they put their hands out in front of them, and then they take their right hand and they turn it face down and their left hand is face up, and it's a slapping game. So that I'm sure people are probably familiar with this, but if not, I don't want to leave you out. It's the idea of you want to slap the person's hand on the right before they grab their hand away and you miss them. And at the same time, on your left side, somebody's trying to do the same thing. Great classic camp game? Yes. Good game to play on the first day? Ask me? No. Why? Because I play that game sometimes and I feel like an idiot. I lose more often than I win. I feel uncoordinated. People are slapping my hand. Why would I pick as a first day game something that excludes folks or makes them uncomfortable? To me, the criteria for a first day, a welcoming kind of activity, is something where we all work together to win and to feel really good about it. So the classic example I give to staff is hot potato, just to pick a classic thing that probably all of them played. The potato, or in this case, the frisbee or the flying disc or the rubber chicken, is being passed around. And like in a duck, duck, goose game or something like that, when the music stops, you're out. There should be no you're out games. I have a footnote about you're out games anyway, so I'll restrain myself, but because they don't need to be out. But that's not a great first day game. A great first day game is something that I wrote about in Learning Leadership, which is my CIT and LIT book. And what's it called in there? It's called popcorn. And popcorn is with a beach ball. And the objective, we're a popcorn popper. And the idea is to pop the corn or the beach ball up as many times as we can before it hits the ground. But then somebody times that. And the goal the second time we play it is to try to keep it up, more, or to do more within a certain minute or something like that. There's no losers in this game. And one of the questions you ask after round 1 or 2 is, what can we do to get more people to participate? So then you can take it and have everyone take it. And I say, Michael, and then I bop it over to Travis. And Travis says, Travis, your name, and you bop it over to Kim. So that's a way for everyone to do that. And then there's another variation where we bop it up in the air. And when I bop it, I yell Michael, and everyone echoes Michael. I love that. It took me some years to figure that out. But if you get people to repeat the name, it's more likely they'll remember it, right? That's what they tell you at parties. If Kim comes up and says, hi, I'm Kim Aycock, I say, hi, Kim Aycock, because that'll help it be sticking in my brain. So all the kids say it, and that's another variation of it. And then the last variation of it is what I call the infernal kernel, meaning a kernel for popcorn, where an infernal kernel is spelled IK. And those initials stand for ick. And to create this ick, or this bad thing, while they're trying to keep the ball in the air as many times as possible, and you can institute a rule where you can't have consecutive ones, that makes it more likely that even new kids or shorter kids or less athletic kids can do it. What you do is you throw a beanbag or something like that into the air as well, which to interfere with their bopping the popcorn, the beach ball. And then you throw a bunch of them, or rolled up socks or things, just to visually confuse it. And then when you sit down to take a break, you say, that was ick. sometimes at camp, there's ick that gets in our way of working together. And we can just call that ick. An example of that is put downs. When you put somebody down, they're not willing to play, or they're worried that they're going to be made fun of if they try to do something harder than they did yesterday. So the advantage of this game the first day is that 2 days later, you can say to somebody who makes a bad choice, you can say that's an ick thing. Remember what ick is? Ick is like, when we get in people's way instead of helping them, be more successful. So it's a very useful expression that's easy to remember. And it all comes out of this community building game where we're trying to set the world's record of how many bops can you do in 60 seconds, or how many minutes does it take before everyone touches it. There's so many variations of this to force them to involve every single person in the group. And when you compare that to a hot potato thing, it's night and day, and a very different kind of activity. So can I just add one sentence that applies to staff too? So you want staff to play games. You have staff play popcorn, just as an example. And then you talk to them about why that's a great example of something we want to do with campers the first day. And you ask them to tell you. And that's better teaching, of course. And then they figure out, I get what kind of activities and atmosphere environment we want for kids when they arrive the first day.
That just made me think of one just tiny little thing, because I know we've been talking about new and returning, and I always have to remind myself that every summer the returning campers are also new in a way, because it's a new and different summer. And sometimes I think we forget about that. And
Good point, Kim.
I think just remembering that returning campers, whatever their year, whatever kind of school year they had, or what was going on at home, or all of those kinds of things can minimally or greatly impact how they're showing up at camp. And so even though camp may be a familiar place because they're coming with something that happened over the year, it just feels different, and it might feel ick actually, and so we want to try to help them just, get reacclimated, I guess. And so we could just keep going. There's so much about this. So really enjoyed the conversation this afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty epic.
Yes. And I think that's a great place to leave us. Like, kids are developmentally very different than they were the last time we saw them. And we have no idea what their experiences were during the year. So you really are effectively thank you for bringing us there at the end. You're talking to a different kid than the one who was there last year. Thank you all. I want to turn us now. Oh, before I do that, I just want to say we would really appreciate if you would go to the app that you listen to the show on, go to YouTube and write it in the comments. Some little review about this, or really even better would be, what is one thing that stood out for you in this conversation that you want to implement right away? And all of those things help us get really focused on the topics that are going to be most effective and impactful for you as camp leaders. That means that we are now ready for our tool of the week.
Tool of the week.
I'm going to start us off this time to give the others a sec to get ready. I talked last year about using Google's Notebook LM product for staff handbooks, and as a way to give you a pre-training on your staff manual. And I've been using it for a lot of different things since then. And it is a tool created by Google to help people learn things. You upload a PDF or a video or something. It's built for students originally, and it'll quiz you on it. It'll create an infographic about it. It'll create a mind map of it. It'll just help reframe it so that it finds a way that it works exactly for your brain. One of the things that I use, and you kind of create a different notebook based on different topics. So the one I was working on this morning is I always search for camp staff manuals that are posted on the internet, and I download them and I put them all in there. So at any point a client is looking for a staff manual ideas, like, tell me all the ideas, or write a question that'll help me evaluate those ideas and give me the highlights. My use today is Camp Director Coach. And it's something that I do for our business, take overviews, and I have a specific set of instructions that'll give me kind of a research on the book and what that person's about and the lessons from there. and take and pull that together from books that I own, so that when I have a problem, I can go to this panel of different people. It's an imaginary panel because I just use their book or the things that they've posted in the world, and ask them the question like they were my coaching panel. They know all the things that I want to know, and that has been good. I've used it to say create an evaluation tool based on all of your things, all of you all together. Build an evaluation tool for this thing I want to teach, and it'll help me find the stuff that's missing on how to do introductions at camp, or how to meet new people and help them remember you, and help them make, like, all those things are built in because I've taken all of those people whose books I've bought and put them into this notebook. So Notebook LM, lots of great uses, and getting better all the time. I especially like now that it can take all of the sources in there and pull together a pattern or a mind map or an infographic summary of those, all of which helps me remember what's in there and what's all part of the tool, who's all part of that coaching panel for me. Kim, what's your tool?
So I'm going to give a tool that for some of you hopefully it's not a new tool, but there's some new things that have been added to this tool. This is through some of the volunteer work that I do with ACA, with Project Real Job. We have a little section on ACA's website. So if you just go to Project Real Job, there's all kinds of great stuff to help you with staff, like social media posts and videos and all kinds of stuff. When I specifically want to point you to today, because it relates to the topic that we've been talking about but with the staff angle, and that is welcoming our new folks into camp. Well, I'm just really appreciative of Marcy Glad, who wrote a blog about for people who work on the computer at camp, like we hardly ever think about that group of people and like what kind of training they might need to help them be successful. So her blog, which will be linked in the show notes, is just amazing. And then Kelsey Melton also wrote one about how to engage and onboard international staff. And it has this amazing, beautiful checklist that helps you, like, this is what you do, this many months out. And as you're, just getting closer and closer to camp, to help those folks, because so many times our international staff, like, coming from so far, how do we welcome them and integrate them into our community? Well, these two resources are just top notch. So I want to highlight those.
My constant theme, Kim, around welcoming international staff is have tea, not just coffee. Michael,
and
what's
give
your tool?
the temperature in Celsius and in Fahrenheit. Like,
yes, totally.
Right?
So
like, just even that. Like,
That's
I'm just doing that on staff interviews. Like the other day, I was like trying to explain, the low temperature. I'm like, I'm going to look this up for you because you need to know, like, how you're going to. Anyway.
So it works for your brain. Well done.
Yeah. Am I up next? Did I read that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to think of something unusual or weird. I'm going to suggest that you read a Sherlock Holmes story. You didn't see that coming, did you? Sherlock Holmes took my brain apart in the 7th and 8th grade. And the last book I wrote, I dedicated in part a chapter to my 7th and 8th grade English teacher, Anne Bobera. And she had me read a story called The Red-Headed League, but you can start anywhere. These were written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. There's 56 short stories, easy to read. They're quick. You read them in an hour. And 4 novels based on the world's most famous detective. And in the Intentional Camp book, I quote my favorite Sherlock Holmes quote, which is in one of the lesser-known adventures called The Blanched Soldier, which I wouldn't recommend you read. It's not one of the best ones, but a constable, a police officer, is blown away by Sherlock Holmes' amazing abilities to observe and make deductions. And he says, "Why, Mr. Holmes, you see everything." And Holmes' reply is, "I see no more than you, but I have trained myself to notice what I see." And as a young person, when I read that, it reconstructed my brain. I started realizing that, as they say in another Holmes adventure, Hounds of the Baskerville, which is one of, you may be more familiar with that. That's one of the novels about this phantom dog, supernatural perhaps, who knows? But what he says is that in essence is the world is filled with obvious things that we don't ever observe. And so I think this is a great lesson and a fun way to absorb it for anyone in camp leadership. And the fast example I'll give you, I did, my favorite chapter in that book is about what do we call it and why. So for example, some camps, this is not a criticism. Here's the disclaimer. It's not a right or wrong. Some camps call camp groups a division, or they have things like unit heads. If you take a step back from that thing with which we're very familiar at your particular camp and just ask way before, camp begins, is that the warmest word we can use to describe it? What's the temperature of that word? Is division an old military term, which in the 40s and 50s when camps sometimes, were founded? That's an example of that. Why do we call it that, and why is an example of things that are just so obvious to us that a very fun activity is to sit down with your leadership team and make a list of a glossary. Some camps have it. It's even on their website. Look at your glossary or make one of all the things you call everything. And then just for fun, there's no wrong or right answer, is that the best name for it? This doesn't mean throw out tradition, but it means think like Sherlock Holmes. Take the things that are obvious and take a renewed and fresh look at it. And that changed the way I think, and is a marvelous example of something we can do over a pizza that's really quite fun and takes things that we take for granted and looks at it through fresh eyes, which fits our subject today, which is look with fresh eyes as to what the experience is like for especially a new time camper as well as a returning one.
Michael, are you familiar with the term nose blindness?
Nose blindness?
Yeah.
Never heard it before. No, please. Teach
Nose
me.
blindness is because the smell of
Can I
things
guess?
Yes, please.
It's right in front of your nose?
Mm-mm.
No? Oh, okay.
No.
All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just as it relates really to Sherlock Holmes, because scent is such we associate smells with feelings and places, but it's also not a dominant sense. You can become blind to the smell of things. Well, you don't notice the smell of things when you're around them. Having grown up on a farm, I didn't notice what a farm smells like until people would come. It's like, no, I'm nose blind to what a farm is.
Of
And
course.
anybody
That's
can
great.
get used to us and just doesn't notice it. And it's the same thing at camp. You're just so used to it that you can't notice it anymore until you turn on that observational noticing.
I love that, Travis. You always teach me so much. That's exactly right. When you drive into a steel town and you say,
Yes.
how can somebody live here? That smell, or
Yeah.
even a place where there's a huge chocolate factory and it's the sweet smell of chocolate, which
Yep.
how do they not know that? It's because they've become used to it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a wonderful nose blindness. Excellent. I'll remember that when I take my allergy medicine tomorrow morning.
Perfect.
Nose
Correct.
blindness. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Chris, what's your tool?
So when I was a camp director, and I was famous for this, I could not keep track of my water bottle or my clipboard. It became a joke. And the directors had an administrative assistant. And I kid you not, on the job description, part of the job description is know the location of Chris's water bottle and clipboard at all times. Do you know what solves that problem instantly? An AirTag or Tile, right? If you don't have an iPhone, like just Tile, just slapping that baby on your water bottle. It takes the responsibility off someone else to know where your stuff is. I know it's like the barest suggestion, but it would have changed my life and it would have made someone else's life way easier at camp. The way on the walkie-talkie, Chris can't find his clipboard. Does everyone have an iPhone, Chris's clipboard? It's like, I mean, it's just too much. So if your camp has internet, if you can access the internet at camp, get some tiles and AirTags and take care of your stuff. Because, I go to any activity center and I put it down. First thing I do is put it down, right? End of the story. Then I walk away. 14 campers want to hug me. 18 staff want to tell me, oh, just one thing. Of course, I'm not going to remember. But then after all that, whip out my phone and be like, oh, right, left it on the field. Oh, don't get sticker shock with these tags because I trust you. Yeah, how much money have I spent on water bottles? Like during the session, because I'm certain they're lost forever. So when you factor that in, it pays for itself.
Well, and may I add, Chris, it also eliminates the cost of an entire seasonal employee who was hired just to follow you around. So, I mean, how many tiles is that worth? I would say
Think
quite a
of the
bit.
savings You know what I
It's
mean?
brilliant.
Savings. But also, wait, but just one thing. On your walkie-talkies, like honestly, anything of like super value that gets carried around camp, you might want to think about having a tag on it to locate it. We're
Yes.
terrified of losing the walkie-talkies because what? They're expensive. So I just thought of that. Anything that is critically important, like my clipboard and my water bottle, and the walkie-talkie, slap a tile on it. Yeah.
Yep. And the little keychain clips for tiles and air tags,
Mhm.
they're super cheap.
Yeah. Work it out.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Kim, if people want to follow up or even better, hire Kim to do some training or consulting for them, how do they get in touch with you?
Thank you, Travis. It's Kim Aycock, KIMAYCOCK.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim, for being on this and coming back for this topic as well. Michael, how about you? How can people find your books, hire you to do training, come in and reimagine, ask all the right questions at a camp?
Thank you. The website is Michael Brandwein, MichaelBrandwein.com. If you put /store, you get to the bookstore for my 7 books. And otherwise, if you take the / off of that, you can see the different things that I do for camps and schools and many other places as well. Yes. And can I also say, if you go to ACAIL, as in ACA Illinois, ACAIL.org, and you do / and you do Michael Brandwein, you'll find links to events that I'm doing that are sponsored by ACA Illinois, including in the spring of 2026, my supervision, a 1-day training for leadership team members that's done virtually, and other ones that are coming up even before that, depending on when this airs. So thanks for letting me mention that.
Of course. Thank you for being on the show. And despite, folks, what you may have heard other people say, it's Brandwein, not Brandywine. He's not a hobbit. He's a man who teaches us lots of things. But I have heard Brandywine so many times that I was like, all right. Chris.
Well, you can go to my website, planetchris.net, or you can send me an email, planetchris@gmail.com. I don't know why I'm struggling to remember these things. That's all right? planetchris@gmail.com. Someone check that real quick. Or follow me on Instagram @planetchris1.
Excellent.
And I didn't mention my email. It's just mail, MAIL, @michaelbrandwein.com.
Excellent.
And if you want some
Good. And
Kimspiration,
you have some feedback you want to get.
Kimspiration, you can find me on Instagram, Kim_Aycock_. That's always fun. I just
underscore at the end, Kim?
Yes, Kim
Okay.
_Aycock_. Yep.
Okay. There we go. Thank you all very much. If you have feedback on this show or any other show, you can reach me, Travis at gocamp.pro. I'm always interested in the topics, the big picture topics about camp that you're struggling with. And excuse me, Chris and I'll try to bring on just the right people to have that discussion for you. I'm going to take a second and highlight one of our other shows. I want you to please check out another podcast I record with Dr. Mandy Baker called The Pudding. And our job is to take all of the research being done in the camp industry and make it applicable for you at your camp. Break it down, talk about it in plain language, and give you tools to better explain what camp is about, the benefits of it, and just to develop a deeper understanding of what this means. So if in this show or this app where you're listening to us, if you're a podcast listener, search for The Pudding, you will find our other show there. Chris and I also want to thank the sponsors of this week's episode, as well as our editor, Ryan Vadertorn, and GoCamp Pro's executive producer of podcasting, Matt Wilfred.
And I want to again thank Kim and Michael for being here, and thank you for the evening, friends.
The Camp Hacker podcast is brought to you by Beth and Travis Allison, summer camp leadership training and marketing consultants. Thanks for listening. Camp Hacker, bringing your world into focus.